Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. It's the stoop. It's boxball, stickball, Spaldings and broom handles. It's Parkies, the candy stores, Tar Beach. It's the boys, the girls, the big guys, the immigrants, the newcomers, the Cross Bronx Expressway, and Co-op City. It's Crotona Park, Crotona Park East. It's the block. And our guide to the block is Phil Coltoff, who grew up on a stretch of Crotona Park East in the South Bronx. Phil is a visiting professor and executive in residence at the Silver School of Social Work at NYU. He led the Children's Aid Society in New York City from 1981 to 2005 and consults for many nonprofits. In November 2004, Phil received the Townsend Harris Award from City College, its highest honor for alumni. Phil, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's been literally 20 years, I guess, since we last spoke. But I have to tell you, this book was a very, very evocative reading for me, who grew up in Queens in the 50s and 60s. There's so much in common. Let's turn to your words and your reaction. You quote, "The block was a place of such innocence, experimentation, and youthful joy that over the years I have been moved to revisit it, the park, and the school many times." Is it really possible to go back home again?
Well, some think, of course, that it isn't. And it's the popular saying that you can't go back home. The interesting thing, as it was said in one of the movies by Avery Corman, I think it was Kramer v. Kramer.
Great courtroom scene in Tweed Courthouse. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Where he, in speaking to one of his friends, says, people search for their roots in Hungary and Russia and in Ireland. I get on the subway and go back up to the Bronx.
Yeah, like I go back to Queens with my wife on the J train. Okay.
Right. So
go ahead.
I have always loved that part of my life that I spent on the block.
Talk about, when is it? It's sort of the early adolescence to young manhood?
Well, I was born on the block.
Okay.
So I went to the block until I left when I was 21 years old.
This is wartime?
This was Depression time.
Okay.
Late Depression.
Okay.
Into World War II.
Okay.
And I reference that, as you know, in the book.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And what I tried to do in the book was to create a sense of what life was like for the kids, for us, and for the families who lived on that block, in that neighborhood, during those times.
And go ahead.
So, the joy was the friendships, the games, the sports, the park, just the whole sense of adventure. The part of growing up, the joy was always kind of related to or tailored by the world around us. So during the Depression, while I was very young, I do remember people being online for potatoes. It's kind of a vague memory, but there they were along Wilkins Avenue in Boston.
And you can close your eyes and visualize that
Still
street.
can.
And you can give me the stores.
Oh, still can, absolutely. And the store owners, right?
And their children.
Dave, the bicycle store.
Come on.
Mario, the barber.
Who was the meat guy?
Oh, the meat guy was Izzy.
Hey, come on. We had
Izzy Magida.
Oh, excuse me. We had Tony,
Right.
different ethnicity, but the
Sure,
same
sure.
job. How did you come to write the book, though?
Well, Doug, I always, the block was always a part of my life.
And
as I grew
do you
up,
still associate with some of the big
I do.
guys?
Oh yeah, some of the big guys, some of the
Oh,
what
okay.
we call
Who were the big guys?
five.
Okay, go ahead.
The big guys were all of 2 or 3 years older than we
Hey,
were.
come on. That was a huge difference then.
Huge
when you're
difference.
14 and they're 17. Come on.
Absolutely. And we tried to please the big guys. We tried to hang around their fringes. And then at a certain point, we said, we're better in sports than they are.
Yeah.
And we challenged them.
'Cause they're into girls.
We challenged them to a punch ball game. We then challenged them to a 2-touch football game.
All in the street.
All in the street.
All in the street. No
court
adults.
At the park. No adults.
No adults. Now, your street was a through street, right?
Crotona Park was, our street was the last block on Crotona Park East.
Right.
And we were between Wilkins Avenue and Prospect Avenue.
Okay.
That was the life on the block.
And it was your universe.
It was absolutely our full universe. There were about 15 relatively small tenements, all joined by a common wall.
Okay, right. And then how many units were in each tenement?
20.
Okay, so you've got a significant number of folks.
Oh, yeah. And some people, particularly during the Depression, were doubled up.
Right, sure.
So it was a lot of people, but everyone knew each other.
Right.
And it was
And your doors were unlocked.
always on.
And everybody was on the stoop. It was Jane Jacobs. Come on, right?
Doug, that's right. That's right. The stoop was part of life.
It was everything.
We were lucky because we lived right opposite Crotona Park.
Right.
So that the stoop, was kind of the small infrastructure of each house.
Right.
In other words, when you were on the stoop, you
Tell
lived
me.
in that building.
Excuse me, tell me.
But if you were on the park bench, you shared.
That's right. Okay, I get it. This is one of several recent works. In fact, in the previous show, I interviewed Arlene Alder on her book in the Bronx, and there's this one of the common elements that jump out in both books. Commonality is the park. The Bronx is 25% parkland. Out of her 64 interviewees, loads of them talked about the park. You lived the park. Your whole book is the park. And the other thing was teachers. Again, her 64, it was teachers, you teachers. There's something happening here.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
There is. And, firstly, the park was a Shangri-La, a paradise for city kids where we lived in tenements. And the buildings, as I said, were smack up against each
I
other.
lived 3 blocks from Forest Park. Tell me.
You know. While everyone knew each other in the buildings and where you came from and who argued and who had a good job and who was unemployed, the park was our respite because we can get away in the summer from the sweltering heat. And in the winter, we used the park for sleigh riding and...
And you used it probably for illegal activities
did.
of a variety
We
of types
did.
and things of a sexual nature, I'm sure.
Well, sure. I mean, what...
excuse me.
We grew up in the Bronx, and there's a park.
Hey, I understand.
But the park really...
And you had a golf course, too, didn't you?
Well, no, we didn't have a golf course, but our Crotona Park was built by WPA.
Oh, okay.
Under Roosevelt. So what it had was a variety of things. As far as we were concerned, Baseball Diamond 1 was the most beautiful. And then we also had, there were children's areas. We had handball courts, which became our pitching in.
Come on.
We do a plate on the wall.
Did you
but they
play with a
also had
Spalding or one of those blue balls? When you play?
Spalding.
And your hand would be totally raw and
absolutely.
throbbing. Go ahead.
Particularly if you did curveballs.
Oh, well, you had to.
Right.
That was the skill. Go ahead.
But the park was designed so that there were bocce courts because we had loads of Italian families.
Sure.
There. We had a Crotona swimming pool, which was
That's
across
okay.
the park
Yep,
from us,
yep.
which was so jammed, right, that you have to choose your hour to go in the summer months. But for everybody, it was a place to go where you could have fun, meet people, feel safe, and enjoy it.
Okay, so and sort of taking let's move up in a sense from the ground and look at it from above. basically you're talking about at that time and into the 60s and 70s, you're talking about Jews, Italians, and some Irish, but primarily Jews and Italians. And one of the interesting things in your book and others that I both experienced and read about is that there was a comedy there. There was a collaboration and there was community, but at the same time, there were real ethnic and religious differences. Did you intermarry, for example? And that's, it's not quite the melting pot. Now,
yeah.
Fast forward. You've been doing this now, I don't want to say forever, but for a long time. What are the commonalities between the folk who lives there now? What are the commonalities between the folks who live there now and the folks then? And where do they go?
Well, the first part is that our block was largely Jewish and Italian, with a sprinkling of Latinos.
Okay.
Largely Cuban.
Okay.
As we get into the 60s and into the 70s, the area becomes principally Latino, largely Puerto Rican, and African American. Boston Road, even in the 30s and 40s, was largely black.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And Morris High School, for example, that I went to, which was, at 165th and Boston Road.
Right. Borderline.
Essentially, we integrated.
Right.
With white
Borderline.
kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was the first redistricting that was
the
done
60s.
in the Bronx.
Yeah, right.
And so that's where, we kind of, was an incredible experience for all of us to have that
turbulent times,
have that kind of mixture.
School, right?
And it was a great school, and stuff that wasn't talked about until much later on about integrated clubs and classes and after school.
You folks were really pioneers. It's recognized, but I think this book really brings it out.
Thank you. Now, the interesting thing, Colin Powell,
right,
who went to Morris High School,
right,
he was a year after me,
right.
He tells a very funny story, and we've met. He was.
Go ahead.
I
might know
on
this
the
one.
board
Go
of
ahead.
Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and
Go ahead.
I wasn't. He said that when he was coming up in the military, and people would talk about where they grew up and the schools they went to, he would say, "I went to Morris High School." No one ever heard of Morris High School. He said when he became chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he would talk about where he went to, everybody said they went to Morris High School.
That's exactly right. You got to please the boy. But also, he was a Shabbos goy. Explain.
Oh, absolutely.
Explain.
Well, Shabbos goy is when religious, ultra-Orthodox Jews were celebrating the Sabbath. They're not allowed to do certain things, drive a car, or put on the lights, electricity. So they would look for a non-Jewish person on the block or in the building who would get a couple of quarters or a couple of dollars later on, going on, turning on the lights, or hitting the elevator button.
This is good experience.
So that's right. So, and they were called Shabbos goys. Goys, because that was the somewhat derogatory term for non-Jews.
Right.
And Shabbos because it was the Sabbath.
I get it. I mean, if you read these biographies and watch these documentaries, there were all these absolutely wonderful people coming out of the Bronx, as well as, the people that you're interviewing who are sort of real people rather than, celebrities, but accomplished people.
I have to tell you, Doug, this one quick story. Al Pacino went to PS 61. He was called Sonny, right? He was after me, but my cousin were very, very good friends with him. And then I'm years later at Children's Aid Society, and I hear that Al Pacino would like to do a benefit for Children's Aid. And great, it turns out to be a wonderful benefit. Pacino was incredible. And then I said to him, when we were talking privately, how come you chose Children's Aid? We're delighted, but tell me why. And he goes like this. He said, because I wouldn't have teeth in my mouth without Children's Aid. At PS 61, there was a dentist, and I remember it too. I didn't realize that was a Children's Aid Society dentist when I went. Pacino did. And so he looked and gave me his smile to show me his teeth that was fixed by dentists from the Children's Aid.
Yeah, and he talks about his time in the Bronx in a number of these works, the documentaries, and in Arlene Alder's book. Okay, let's get back to the neighborhood. It changed, and it's changed now. You know, there's a demographic change, there's a socioeconomic change, and also there's a different. And is there a different feel on the ground as well? Just describe the community and sort of where it fits in this microcosm.
Well, the first interesting thing is that this whole area of what's commonly called Morrisania has, of course, changed. And as I mentioned, it's largely Latino and African American. Much of the area, Charlotte Street, where 3 different presidents came.
Was Carter the first? No. Or Reagan? One of them,
No,
yeah.
Carter was the first.
Carter was the first.
Carter,
I mean,
then,
wasn't Carter there either just before or just after Howard Cosell during the World Series looks out and says, ladies
Bronx
and
is
gentlemen, the Bronx is burning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, I guess, Jonathan Mahler's book title. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You're right. So that whole area was devastated, right? And the whole contour of the neighborhood changed because buildings were burnt out, were largely abandoned by landlords. And the neighborhood as we knew it, walking down this street or that street, you would judge it by the buildings and the stores and the contour and
Yeah,
curves.
the topography, you got to know the terrain.
And all of that pretty much was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so from apartment buildings or tenements, in large areas, you now have small private homes, which was part of the redevelopment.
Right, right.
Originally, they were going to build larger housing facilities, affordable housing, but money wasn't forthcoming. That went down the drain.
Right.
This is now in the 70s.
Right.
So, but the block that I grew up on, Crotona Park East, largely, for whatever reason, remained intact. You don't have all of the tenements. A few of them are gone. Some of the stores are not there anymore.
Right.
And 1 or 2 that are of a different quality. But there are people living on the block. And the tenements that we lived in are still up. Some have been renovated. And people clearly take pride in them. When I go back, I've met a lot of the people. They welcomed me back into my own apartment.
Is that their reaction? I mean, you're sort of a welcome relic from the past.
Not only
who values where they go ahead.
Doug, at one of my last visits, 4 of the people saw me, 2 kids and 2 adults, and they said, one of them remembered my name, you're Phil, because I had been there before, and said, "It's warm enough. Let's go into the park and have a catch." And I did, and as a matter of fact...
Oh, there's a picture of it in here. Right, okay.
So people are struggling. They're poor. There is still considerable economic and social problems. That's a reality. But the block is not only intact, there are the kinds of relationships between people that's happening in that area, which resembled what I experienced in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
The more things change.
Friendship,
right.
Kids. The park the benches are still the place where adults hang out. The stickball and baseball field is where the kids are. So there's this reality. What I did at Children's Aid,
go ahead,
right, was we established the first community schools in New York, in the nation. And we first established them in the Washington Heights community, desperately needed.
Sure.
After we created 6 or 8 of them in Washington Heights and in Upper Harlem, we shifted our attention to the South Bronx.
Right.
And guess what? PS 61, the elementary school that I went to, junior high school 98, Herman Ritter Junior High School that I went to, and Morris High School all became Children's Aid Society community.
Wow.
And the schools were open till 9 at night, sometimes later, on weekends.
Yep, I remember the experiment.
Yeah, parents, there was a parent drop-in center right in the school every day, a room reserved for them. There was parent activities as well as children's activities. There was a summer camp So that the school that I went to, which I had mixed feelings about as a kid, became a health center, a community center, and a public school wrapped up into one. And people loved it. Can't keep them away.
Okay, now let's go back to the transition of the Bronx, the Howard Cosell quote. Some of that, or much of that, and you talk about it in the book, is a result of public policy. You have Robert Moses standing on the cliff overlooking the Bronx and saying the road's got to go here, and he bulldozes entire neighborhoods, cities, in fact, to build the Cross Bronx Expressway. And then you have Co-op City, which sucks the middle class out of where you are and elsewhere into the... Talk about the impact of public policy in those two arenas. You know, the Co-op City. What was it? Was Freedom Land before it was Co-op City. Did you go to Freedom Land?
I did. I did, actually.
Another commonality that we have. Go ahead. Talk about the impact of those two pieces of two public policy.
Yeah. They were major policy decisions that affected not only hundreds of thousands of lives, but affected both the geography and the demography of the Bronx. Firstly, the Cross Bronx Expressway, essentially, you know, while it was a huge opportunity for people crossing the Bronx to get to New Jersey and further south.
Right, or from New England into
commerce.
Right, into Long Island.
You know,
right.
So from an economic perspective, of the channels of commerce.
Of commerce. And it's very automobile and truck friendly because of Moses' ideology.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What it did do, though,
Go ahead.
was essentially in the social sense and then in the socioeconomic sense, divided the Bronx between the reasonable haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And south of the Cross Bronx Expressway, from essentially 180th Street or Tremont Avenue, all the way south.
Right. Okay. We're
became-
going to have to look at it. I mean, yes, I remember having lived there for 4 years. Go ahead.
Became cut off.
Right.
From
Right.
the wealthier. Not that they were ever wealthy, but the middle class
Right.
section.
Right. And he wanted to build these across Manhattan too, but we won't go there. Go ahead. Talk
right.
about this.
So the people who were in the south of that area, which is where I live, one were shut off from the larger geography of the Bronx. But more than that, these were the poorer folks. These were the old working class union folks. These were the not college educated people. And also this became the area for major population changes because it was less expensive. You can get apartments.
So it was much more transition.
And it was
And cheap.
Definitely
Oh,
cheap, transitional and inexpensive.
Right.
And so when one looked up at the Bronx in the 70s, what you saw in the south part of the borough were very poor people. Institutions left. You couldn't find pharmacies. They just didn't exist. Supermarkets were rare, right? You didn't have health facilities. Hospitals left. Community centers went elsewhere.
Communities were destroyed.
And exactly. And so the institutional life of the South Bronx became decimated, which was at one time very rich
Right.
and very potent.
Well,
now
you can read it and see
It's
it.
being recreated now, which is wonderful. It's not where it was, but at least it's on a different pathway.
Yeah, it's more less the Bronx no thanks Ogden Nash, and it's now the Bronx yes please.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead.
That's right. So then what came on its heels was Co-op City. It took a while to build it on Old Freedom Land.
Sure.
45 to 50,000 people, right? And the people who were in the part of the Bronx that we're talking about, who had a little bit more money, who had a job, right? Even though it was a needle trade
Right.
job or a job in the garment, they basically said, here's our opportunity.
Right. They made a rational decision.
Oh, absolutely. They built this. It's new apartments. They have a transportation hub. There are synagogues and churches built right in.
Right.
It's a massive city in itself, right?
Right.
50,000 people is half the size of Yonkers.
Yeah, a new concept in urban development. Go ahead.
But what it did do was deplete the rest of the population in the South Bronx.
Right.
Those who could did. Those who couldn't were left behind.
Okay, now let's look forward. Got a minute. What do you see? I mean, can you, from your microcosmic block, see things, and then you're sort of looking at it from above? Where do you see the Bronx going?
I definitely see tremendous strides and signs of improvement. Population is increasing. Population, which was close to 3 million, went down to 1 million and a fraction. Now it's on its way back up. People are moving in. The infrastructure is there: transportation, water, sewer, and building is starting to happen.
Excuse me,
it's
can
still
I
got a ways to go.
Wait, let me interrupt. You've got the Botanical Gardens. You've got the Bronx Zoo. I mean, the Bronx has got substantial stuff. Okay, you're Yankee.
So you got the Yankees, you got Bronx High School.
You
of
talk.
Science.
You talk.
No, there's the social infrastructure is there, and it's changing for the better. Yeah, I think you have good political leadership that's developing now, or better political leadership. You have social agencies, not just Children's Aid Society. You have Boys and Girls Clubs. You have other faith-based organizations coming in to serve the population, particularly the youth population. So I think the signs are all positive right now. And what I hope would happen, right, is that as communities are rebuilt, the image of Crotona Park East will become the same image on Longfellow Avenue and Bryant Avenue and Kelly Street, where people can again find comfort in each other, build relationships with one another. The young people can have friendships which will sustain them for life. What I have always believed, and so many people who have read the block have communicated with me and said, it not only brought back my childhood, but it helped me to realize that my youth is part of who I am today.
Ooh, nice. Okay. My thanks to Phil Coltoff for being on the show and for his book, The Block, full of insights and looking back and nostalgia. Join me next week when my guest will be Richard Lipsky of the Foundation for Criminal Justice here on CUNY TV. Excellent. Thank you. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.